Hi, I'm Kenton, and this is Kenton Knows. Since it is getting colder and it is likely that you might be receiving no heat calls or texts from your tenants, I thought I'd do a quick video on what I do when I receive a no heat or no air conditioning maintenance request to hopefully avoid going to the property or sending a technician. Near the end of the video, I will explain a trick I use to temporarily give my tenants a little AC if it is currently not cooling without actually going to the property. So be sure to stick around for that. In this video, I will explain the steps I go through with my tenants anytime the apartment has no heat, and many of the steps are the same if it has no AC. So all of my apartments have central heat and AC with a dedicated furnace and condenser for each unit. On average, anytime I call an HVAC person to come out to the unit, it's going to be $200 to $250 just for him to show up, and he'll probably find something he needs to fix. So I like to ensure there's actually a problem before calling him. If you like this video, please hit the like button. I would really appreciate it, and consider subscribing to my channel. Also, click the bell so you'll get notified anytime I post a new video, and leave me any comments below as well. My maintenance requests normally come in as texts from my tenants or a maintenance request from Tenant Cloud, which is the free property management software I use to manage all of my properties, as well as accept applications, run credit and background checks, and everything else I use an online property management system for. There is a link below in the description. First, I ask the tenant to send a picture of the thermostat to confirm that the switch is correctly set to the cool or heat position, and I see what the set temperature is versus the current temperature reading on the thermostat for that apartment. And if there's also a low battery signal, which sometimes is just the issue. My thermostats are all digital displays, and obviously the hope is the problem will be clear and it can be corrected just from the picture. The next thing I ask the tenant to check is the furnace disconnect switch. There is a light switch which is attached to the furnace and used to disconnect the power to the furnace anytime you are working on it. I ask the tenant to send me a picture of the light switch on the furnace. For all of my furnace disconnect switches, on is in the up position. And many times there is an issue as the tenant has just turned off the light switch thinking they're saving electricity when actually they're just turning off the furnace. It's always a nice win when this is the issue and it starts right up. If that doesn't work, I ask them to look and see if there's a flashing light on the furnace. If there is a light, I ask them to count the flashes between pauses. The number of flashes lets you know the reason your unit isn't working. I'm not a certified HVAC technician, but several of these errors are fairly easy to fix, and I'll walk you through a few of the basics shortly. If there are not any lights flashing, it's because the cover isn't installed in a way that has the viewing window lined up with the lights. I normally don't ask the tenant to remove the cover, unless of course I know the tenant is capable of it, and then I'll ask them to do it. If none of these worked, I ask the tenant to go back to the thermostat and change the batteries. Even if it doesn't have a low battery signal, sometimes the batteries are still dead. And if this doesn't correct the problem, then I'll need to stop at the property to do the troubleshooting myself, or I'll simply have the HVAC technician go if I don't have the time or if I'm out of town. If I do go to the unit, my first step is checking and changing the air filter. Then I'll remove the furnace cover and see if I can see the flashing lights for the error code. You may need to flip the disconnect switch off, hold down the safety switch, which is the button that pops out when you remove the cover, and then turn the switch back on and see if the unit fires up. And if it doesn't, you'll hopefully see the flashing error code and you can count the flashes and then determine what the error code means. If the error has to do with a pressure switch, it is a very easy repair, and you'll just need to look up your correct model number and then look for the pressure switch associated with it. Here's an example of a pressure switch. This would normally connect to a hose, and these parts would connect to the wires. It's super easy to change this out, and it's also very easy to find which one is the correct one for your unit. If it is an ignition problem, the igniter can easily be changed as well. If the igniter doesn't glow, it is a clear indication that it needs to be replaced. If it glows for a while, but the gas never comes on, it probably still just needs to be replaced, as the safety realizes it isn't functioning properly, so it won't open the gas valve. You can test it with a voltmeter, but in my experience, it's fairly inexpensive, so I simply replace it. Here is what a common igniter looks like. You can see this is the part that the wires connect fairly easily, and this part up here will glow red. but be careful, don't touch that with your fingers because your oil and dirt will actually damage it, and then when it won't last as long as one that isn't touched. If the furnace fires up but then turns off, it could be many things, but the first thing I check is the flame sensor to see if that's clean. I take it out, rub it with some steel wool just to be sure. And then, if that doesn't work, there are plenty of really good YouTube videos explaining more about each furnace model and how to troubleshoot or repair each specific part. So I'd recommend watching a video specifically on your furnace model to change any of the items I mentioned. Now, obviously, if none of that works, or if it's easier for you, just call a technician. They'll be able to troubleshoot it and fix it. But I do think these are fairly easy repairs. The parts are relatively inexpensive. They're super easy to find online. And as long as you know your furnace model number, you'll be able to look up the correct part number for your furnace. I normally use repairclinic.com to look up a model number and part. Then I will search for the lowest price for that particular part on other websites. The other thing you should check is the air intake and the exhaust, as well as the drain lines. If any of these are clogged, it will cause the unit to not run. If you have a condensate pump, I recommend pouring some vinegar in it every 3 months or so, just to reduce and break up any mold that may build up in the pump and tube, which would then allow it to not work as well as it should. Now, you can usually buy most of the parts I've mentioned on Amazon or an HVAC part company. Many of the local supply houses in Chicago actually won't sell them to me without an HVAC license, which I don't have. So I'm not sure how prevalent that is in other cities, but you can definitely get them all online. Here's a typical furnace, and there's the disconnect switch on the side, which just looks like a regular light switch. And then on the inside, you can see there's a pressure switch. The orange tube is the air tube, and the 2 purple wires connect to operate it. And then below here, you can see right there is the igniter. And then over on the left side is the flame sensor. Okay, here I'm holding down the switch. Now you can hear that the fan started, and now we're going to be watching for the igniter to start to glow. And it does take a few seconds here, so I'm doing it real time so you can kind of see that it does take a little bit of time. And it should pop up. Here it goes, and you can see it's slowly getting red, and it has to get to a high enough temperature before the safety will release the gas. And so it should happen here in a second now. And there it goes. So you can see it's fired up, and you can see the flame sensor right there. So if the flame sensor was having a problem, it would then turn right back off, but it's working fine. So we're good to go. So you can see my finger on the safety switch right here, and as I remove it, you can see that it shuts off. So that's what the safety switch does. I should also mention that if I have an AC problem, I will ask the tenant to look outside of the condenser, and if possible, see if the line is frozen or covered in frost. Of course, this only works if the condenser unit is on the ground or on the porch, not on the roof, but anyways. If it is, I ask the tenant to turn the air conditioning off and then wait until the line is thawed, which will usually take between 6 and 8 hours. I also ask them to check the furnace filter. The usual reasons the line can freeze is the filter is clogged, or the fans are dirty, or both, which reduce the airflow. 2, the coolant is low and needs to be refilled, which is normally due to a leak. Or 3, the air conditioning was turned on when it's actually cold outside and you shouldn't have been running it, but that's usually not the issue. So the most common reason is usually the low refrigerator coolant, which means you have a leak. Now, what I have found is that if it's a very small leak, there is a way to temporarily give your apartment some cool air for a little while, assuming the line was frozen and then it has thawed. So the trick is, and especially I use this if it's at the end of the summer and I kind of want to put off the air conditioning repair until the next year, or if it's, say, a Sunday and it's going to be really expensive to get the technician out there, so then I'll use this trick. So what you do is you ask the tenant to only put the temperature a couple degrees below the current temperature in the apartment. That way it cools slowly, and that will allow it to actually get some cooling And then as the temperature comes down, just tell them to lower it a couple degrees. This won't always work, and it isn't a long-term solution, but it usually gives the tenants a little cooling for a little while and keeps the line from freezing. It clearly isn't as efficient, and it will take longer to cool the apartment. If it's really hot out, it may not be able to do very much, but in the right situation, it can work temporarily and at least save you from paying an emergency rate for a technician. I hope this gives you a little more understanding of how to respond to a no heat or no AC call from your tenant, and maybe saves you a little money on furnace repairs as well. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and leave me a comment. Please be sure to check out my other videos as well. Thank you for watching Kenton Knows.